All right, gather round, folks, because today we're re-diving into a story that will make you think twice about dusting off Grandma's old recipe book. This isn't your typical Thanksgiving tale of turkey and togetherness. This is the chilling story of the Asher family and the cursed yeast that nearly devoured them whole. Our story begins on a crisp November afternoon, the kind filled with the scent of pine and the promise of a hearty meal. The Asher family, Tom, Sarah, and their two kids, Leo and Mia, were in full Thanksgiving prep mode. The house buzzed with that familiar, chaotic energy. Sarah was wrestling with a mountain of potatoes, while Tom was trying to figure out the logistics of deep-frying a 20-pound turkey without setting the deck on fire. Amidst the chaos, Mia, the youngest, was sent on a mission to the attic to find the good gravy boat, a family heirloom that only saw the light of day once a year. But as she rummaged through dusty boxes of old Christmas decorations and forgotten photo albums, her fingers brushed against something else. It was a book, bound in dark, cracked leather with no title on its spine. It felt ancient, heavy with secrets. Curious, she brought it downstairs. "Hey, Mom, look what I found," Mia announced, placing the hefty book on the flour-dusted kitchen island. Sarah wiped her hands on her apron and looked over. The book seemed vaguely familiar, like a half-remembered dream. It was her great-grandmother Ilara's recipe book, a woman the family rarely spoke of, a woman whose name was often followed by hushed whispers and uneasy glances. Flipping through the brittle, yellowed pages, they found recipes for all the classics: roasted turkey, cornbread stuffing, pumpkin pie. But the handwriting was strange, spidery, and the instructions were odd. The recipe for the heritage turkey brine, for example, called for the usual salt and sugar, but also a pinch of soil from a place of sorrow and water collected under a weeping willow at midnight. They laughed it off as old-world poetic flair. Great-Grandma Ilara was known for being eccentric, after all. A place of sorrow? I guess the spot where I saw the grocery bill will have to do, Tom joked, trying to lighten the mood. The first real shiver of unease came with the stuffing recipe. The Binder of Brotherhoods, it was called. Alongside breadcrumbs and sage, it listed an ingredient that made them all pause. A single, unshed tear from each member of the family, collected in a silver spoon. Leo, ever the skeptic, rolled his eyes. Seriously? This is ridiculous. But Sarah, strangely drawn to the book's mystique, insisted they try it. Come on, it'll be a fun family story. When have we ever cried into our food on purpose? So they did it. Awkwardly, they gathered around the mixing bowl, each thinking of something sad until a single tear fell. As the last tear dropped into the stuffing mix, the kitchen lights flickered violently, then died, plunging them into momentary darkness. When they came back on a second later, a cold draft swept through the room, though all the windows were closed. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth, and something else, something vaguely metallic, like old blood. They tried to dismiss it as a power surge, but a seed of genuine fear had been planted. As the afternoon wore on, they followed more recipes, each one more unsettling than the last. The cranberry sauce required the berries to be crushed with a stone found by a riverbank, while whispering the names of deceased relatives. The gravy needed to be stirred counterclockwise, exactly 99 times, while chanting a strange, rhythmic phrase they found in the margins. words in a language none of them recognized. With each bizarre step they completed, the atmosphere in the house grew colder, more oppressive. Shadows in the corners of their eyes seemed to lengthen and twist into unnatural shapes. Faint whispers seemed to echo from empty hallways, and the faint scent of decay began to overpower the delicious aroma of the cooking food. Leo, trying to get away from the growing tension, went to the living room to watch TV. But as he flicked through the channels, the screen would often flash to static, and for a split second, he thought he saw a gaunt, pale face staring back at him from the screen. He'd shake his head, and it would be gone. Upstairs, Mia was playing with her dolls when she heard a scratching sound coming from inside her closet. When she opened the door, it was empty, but all her dolls had been rearranged to face the door, their plastic eyes seeming to watch her. The breaking point came when Sarah was preparing the heirloom pumpkin pie. The final instruction was the most disturbing yet. Written in frantic, blood-red ink at the bottom of the page were the words, "A drop of blood from the matriarch's hand, to bind the spirits to their kin." Sarah stared at the words, her heart pounding. This was no longer a game. This was something dark, something dangerous. The book wasn't just a collection of recipes. It was a book of rituals. Suddenly, Tom screamed from the dining room. They rushed in to find him staring at the dining table, his face ashen. The table, which they had just set, was in disarray. Silverware was bent and twisted. The good gravy boat Mia had retrieved was shattered on the floor, and carved into the surface of their antique wooden dining table was a single chilling word, ungrateful. Panic finally set in. They were no longer preparing a feast. They were participating in a summoning. Every strange ingredient, every bizarre action wasn't for flavor. It was an invitation. They had been calling upon spirits, vengeful spirits from their own bloodline, tied to great-grandma Ilara. But why were they vengeful? What had the family done? Sarah grabbed the old recipe book, her hands trembling. She flipped past the recipes to the back pages, where she found a diary-like entry written in the same frantic red ink. It was a confession from Ilara. She wrote of a terrible famine that had struck their ancestral village generations ago. Desperate to save her starving family, Ilara had made a pact with ancient hungry spirits. In exchange for a bountiful harvest that would save them, she promised that her descendants would honor them every year with a ritualistic feast, a feast of remembrance and gratitude. But over the generations, the story was lost. The rituals were forgotten, dismissed as the ramblings of an eccentric old woman. The family had grown prosperous, their tables always full, but they had forgotten the source of their original good fortune. They had forgotten the pact. And now the spirits, feeling ignored and disrespected, had returned. They weren't there to share a meal. They were there to collect a debt. The carvings on the table, the whispers, the cold, it was all a warning. They weren't just ungrateful. They were in breach of a contract centuries old. The house began to shake. The cupboards flew open, dishes rattling and smashing onto the floor. The lights flickered and went out for good, leaving them in the terrifying glow of the oven's digital clock. Ghostly figures began to coalesce in the gloom, gaunt, hollow-eyed apparitions with outstretched hands, their silent mouths open, in what looked like screams of eternal hunger. They were the spirits Ilara had made a pact with, and they were here for the feast they were promised one way or another. Trapped in their own home with the vengeful spirits of their past, the Ashers realized their Thanksgiving dinner had become a fight for survival. The delicious meal they had prepared now seemed like a mockery. They hadn't just been cooking. They had been setting the table for their own doom. The final entry in Alara's book offered one last desperate piece of advice. It wasn't a recipe, but a plea. If the pact is broken, the feast must be undone. Burn the offering. Starve the spirits. Show them there is nothing left for them here. It was a race against time. While the spectral forms drifted closer, their whispers growing into a deafening roar of accusation, Tom and Leo barricaded the kitchen door with furniture. Sarah, remembering the instructions, knew what she had to do. They had to destroy the meal. They had to undo the summoning. With tears streaming down her face, not for a recipe, but in pure terror, she grabbed the turkey from the oven, its skin perfectly golden, and threw it into the fireplace. She poured the gravy down the sink, smashed the pie, and dumped the tear-infused stuffing into the trash. With every dish they destroyed, the spirits shrieked in fury, their forms flickering and weakening. They were fighting back the only way they knew how, by taking away the offering. Finally, with the entire feast ruined and the kitchen a wreck, Sarah grabbed the cursed recipe book. This was the source, the anchor. She ran to the fireplace and tossed it into the flames where the turkey was now burning. As the ancient leather cover began to curl and blacken, a final, agonized wail echoed through the house, so loud it shook the very foundations. Then silence. The cold dissipated. The shadows retreated. The oppressive weight in the air vanished, replaced by the smell of smoke and burnt sugar. They huddled together in the dark, messy kitchen, trembling but alive. Thanksgiving was ruined. Their home was a disaster, but they had survived. They learned a powerful lesson that day. Some family traditions are best left buried, and you should always be careful what you cook up on Thanksgiving, because sometimes the ghosts of the past aren't just memories. They're hungry. So what do you think? Is there a creepy recipe or a strange family tradition that gives you the shivers? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this spooky story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the dark side. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.